Welcome back to the Friday Night 360 AZ preview show. She's Haley Stasiak. I'm Jordan Ham. We've had some great guests, Jason Jewell and Dave Zorn, breaking things down for us. As we approach 0 week, we're in the mix right now. Plenty to get to in this opening week. Before we get to our previews, actually, first things first, some news broke while we were on air. Zidane Thomas will be eligible all year. He had to put in a hardship waiver for the AIA. For those who don't know, he actually moved to Florida for about a week from Centennial, moved back, and so he had to go through kind of that transfer process where he might have to sit out half the season. That won't be the case. Richard Obert just reported that. So still waiting on a couple other high-profile transfers, Jack Miller over at Chaparral and that sort of thing. So still waiting on that. But good news for Zidane. I think that was the right move. If he didn't withdraw from a school, from Centennial and into another school, I think you could have called it more of a vacation than anything. So Coach Taylor over at Centennial said he wasn't trying to, go around the system or anything, just one of those unfortunate things. But good news is he's going to be able to play all year. That's good news for the Coyotes. We're going to look at some of these top games here coming up this week. And I think first and foremost, Chandler Red Mountain. We talked to Kevin Wright of IMG last week about Chandler IMG next week, but we have Chandler and Red Mountain, two of the top teams in 6A, squaring off here in week 0.
Red Mountain was one touchdown away from this being the state title game in 2016, and both of these teams just all around on both sides of the ball are pretty good.
Absolutely, and you have a guy like Lance Lawson, who's one of the most dynamic athletes in the entire state. He played running back for them. He was in the Wildcat quite a bit, a great receiver, just picked up his first Power 5 offer from Arizona. And I think this is a guy that if he was maybe 2 inches taller, he'd have a very different recruitment right now. I think a lot of these big schools would be looking at him. I think this first offer now will put some eyes on him. But they're returning a lot of talent in addition to Lawson, a lot of talent on the defense. And one thing that they're kind of switching up is their offensive set. They said they want to be more of a Brophy, more of a Stanford style, where you have the 2 tight ends, you're running between those big offensive tackles, and they just want to continue to try to run you over. So you might not see Lance Lawson maybe in the Wildcat format as much, but definitely going to get a lot of touches for him. And they have a new quarterback here because Austin Duffy has moved on to baseball to focus on that. So definitely something to look out for. Haley, Perry and Desert Vista, two of the top teams in 6A. A lot of high expectations for both teams coming in to this game.
Eric and I talked on AZ Audibles this week about this game, and for me, it's this quarterback matchup. Brock Purdy out of Perry and Derek Klein out of Desert Vista. Purdy was out some of last year with mono, so he's going to come back and finish what he started this year. And then we talked with Dan Hines out of Desert Vista this past week for AZ Audibles, and he told us that Klein is fitting in very well with the offense. So seeing how these two kind of come back for their senior seasons and make an impact on these teams.
Desert Vista has had a history of issues with their first game. They haven't won their first game of the season since 2012. Last year, they dropped their first 3 of 4 games, but then towards the end of the year, no one wanted to play the Thunder. They were such a good team, and they were really able to put it together. I think this is going to be a different trajectory for them. I don't think they're necessarily going to have a slow start. They have a lot of senior leadership in James Stagg, in Elijah Gamage. Derek Klein's a new addition, but obviously brings a new dynamic with the quarterback, so he's going to be a guy to watch, but definitely a tough test with Perry and that high-flying offense. Like you said, Brock Purdy, just a stat filler, can make plays with his arms, with his legs, so that's going to be a really fun game happening. We're going to now shift gears down to Tucson. We've talked so much about Salpointe, Cienega. Ironwood Ridge against Marana. These are two teams that went 9-3 last year, and they square off here in week 0.
Ironwood Ridge is pretty solid in the run game, whereas Marana is pretty solid in the pass game. And Ironwood Ridge has senior running back Nick Brawler. If we botched your last name, I apologize.
Brawler's a great football name, so we're going to go with that.
Last season, he had just over 1,000 rushing yards. So this kind of matchup is going to be a test for their defenses. See how kind of things mesh with that is what I'm watching.
With Marana, they started their season last year with 2 losses to this Ironwood Ridge team and to Cienega. And then they didn't lose until the playoffs against Williams Field, and that's where they rattled off those 9 wins. In the case of Ironwood Ridge, their 3 losses came against Queen Creek twice, once in the playoffs, and then Cienega. So these are 2 teams that I'm not sure many people in the Valley are aware of, but these are 2 really good football teams. And a guy last year for Marana that played really well was Tariq Johnson. 9 receptions, 122 yards, and a touchdown. That was as a sophomore. He's returning. I'm sure he's going to want to try to repeat that performance there against Ironwood Ridge. But I think this also just kind of speaks to Tucson as a whole and the high school football scene. As we said, Cienega made it to the state semis. Sal Point made it to the state semis, but it's not a top-heavy area at all. I know that they're going to be here on the Neighborhood Watch here maybe in the next couple of weeks because there is a ton of programs, a ton of talent, a ton of storylines there. And then we have, speaking of the Tucson area, Notre Dame Prep at Shadow Ridge. An interesting scenario for Notre Dame Prep and how they're able to return to the field after being banned from the postseason last year.
Yeah, the Notre Dame Prep went through some adversity last season with their AIA violations. They couldn't participate in spring ball. They've got some new leadership with head coach George Prelock. So this first game is really going to set the tone for them this season to see if they can right the ship. And then Shadow Ridge is coming off a pretty tough season. So seeing how they start the season to set the tone as well.
This Notre Dame team is so hungry. I was able to talk to them over at ASU for a 7-on-7 tournament. And as Cole Fisher, their running back and linebacker, one of the more vocal guys, he said he was going for guys' throats this year and obviously that was in jest, but he meant it as they feel like the postseason was taken away from them. Spring ball was taken away from them. They lost their head coach, their athletic director. Coach Prelock actually was the freshman coach and coached a lot of these seniors this year. And there's something around the number of 46 seniors on this team. So wow. There's plenty of experience there. A guy to watch, Blake Story. He's a wide receiver, really lanky guy. He's actually a University of Utah lacrosse commit. And Notre Dame Prep has a very good lacrosse team as well. So the athleticism is there. They return a ton of guys on the defense. Vincent Elrod, Joey Jukin, just 2 guys, 100+ tackles for them as well, and 12 of the 14 interceptions last year that the defense had were from juniors. So wow. a lot of defense coming back. Like I said, this team's a very hungry team. We're going to be having conversations about them throughout the year as a contender because I think that you mix the talent and the experience with that fire. I think they're definitely going to be at play. And then our final game we're previewing, Westwood at Skyline. Skyline seems to be a team that flies under the radar quite a bit, and Westwood's trying to continue to build their program up.
Skyline went 9-2 last season and actually opened against Westwood and beat them 62-0 in the opener last season. They had several guys graduate, TJ Duarte, so a new leader under center there. And then Caleb Harden at running back and Jonathan Jackson at tight end, who was a key receiver. So seeing how they fill those holes is going to be interesting.
Skyline each and every week, I think, has the capability to beat anybody in the state, but they haven't really been able to get over that hump in the playoffs. So I think that's why they may not be on the front of your mind when you're thinking of the high school football team. But this is a very, very good team. Their 2 losses last year by a combined 10 points. One, a 7-point loss to Hamilton, a 3-point loss to Red Mountain in the playoffs. So this is a team, I think, again, that's very hungry. They want to get over that hump. They want to make a run. It's a very well-run machine over there, and they definitely want to make some noise. And then in the case of Westwood, as you said, they're trying to continue to build that. I think Spencer Stowers did a great job building them up before he went to Castile a few years ago. But they kind of had some transition there, so there are some ball players. I know you did a great feature on them.
Manny Collier, the sport athlete up there, yeah.
Yeah, very versatile athlete. So that's a guy to watch definitely on that show. So week 0 is here. Really exciting stuff. The season is probably going to go by in a blink, but can't believe it's already here.
I can't either. And with the return of the season means the return of the Friday Night 360 AZ hashtag. So to be sure to use that this Friday night and all season long.